Good evening from New York. I'm Dan Rather. We're 3 days out from another possible government shutdown, and President Trump today shot down a bipartisan immigration bill intended to head the shutdown off. Before Republican Senator John McCain and Democratic Senator Chris Coons ever introduced their bill, the president tweeted out his opposition. The McCain-Coons bill would extend protection to dreamers brought here as children by undocumented immigrants. But it does not earmark funds for Mr. Trump's wall, which he demanded in his own proposal last week, a proposal with which something far greater is at stake than just another short-lived shutdown. For 50 years, the core element, the defining value of America's immigration system has been the family, enabling immigrants to thrive with help from their own building social foundations from which they could venture into American society. But it wasn't always that way. As the nation headed into the 20th century, a wave of new laws erected ideological corridors along the pathways into America. The walls of those corridors were constructed out of sheer racism. Our laws slammed a door in the face of Asians and Africans. The goal, the explicit goal at that time, was to freeze America's ethnic makeup, the way it was in previous years, forever. We implemented formulas, quotas, to do just that. America, the land of revolution, was to change no more, and it worked. Not until 40 years later did the country turn to face the racist barriers it had put up at its gateways. The driving force was a need for more skilled workers. So now, skills, rather than national origin, would open the door to America. Some self-described conservatives, however, were concerned, once again, about a change in the nation's ethnic composition. Without quotas of nationality, what other factor could ensure the consistency of America's ethnicity? Well, the argument went, America can't change that much if entry will also be determined by blood ties between new arrivals and the folks already here. That's right. The new immigration proposal would open the door to more family members because that was what conservatives wanted. In the 1960s, President Johnson embraced this upheaval in the way we looked at immigration and at immigrants.
We must also lift by legislation the bars of discrimination against those who seek entry into our country, particularly those with much-needed skills and those joining their families. In establishing preferences, a nation that was built by the immigrants of all lands can ask those who now seek admission, what can you do for our country? But we should not be asking, in what country were you born?
Now, what conservatives did not know at that time was how few new Americans would come over from the countries they liked, countries such as Norway, for instance. America's ethnic composition began to shift. Now, fast forward to 2018, and with our first black president in the rearview mirror, our new president wants to drag the country back by more than 50 years by cutting back on family migration. In return for granting amnesty to dreamers, those brought here as children who now want to stay, President Trump is demanding that legal immigrants no longer be allowed to bring their brothers and sisters or their parents. So, it is not surprising that family is no defense for undocumented immigrants against the president of the Family Values Party. Immigrants like Miguel Perez Jr., a U.S. Army veteran who gave us 2 tours in Afghanistan, and 2 American children. Now he's fighting deportation back to Mexico, where combat veterans are targeted for conscription into drug gangs there. But if America cannot decide whether the value of its immigrants arises from their nationality, their skill set, their relatives, or even their military service, you may want to consider whether it's time to stop spotlighting individual immigrant success stories altogether. It may be time to stop asking, as President Johnson did, what can you do for our country? Time to stop judging immigrants based on what they can do for our military, our economy, for us. It may in truth be time to gauge immigration based not on what opening doors does for us, but on what closing doors does to us, to all of us. We, America, now send federal agents to arrest the husbands and wives of American citizens as they show up to apply for residency. A study out last week says we are now committing more hate crimes. The number of violent incidents and bigoted rhetoric increased 46% across the country last year against Middle Eastern and South Asian communities. Another study, also out just last week, found a 258% increase in white supremacy propaganda on college campuses. They're coming now for our children. So, as members of Congress approach the deal this week on what our immigration system ought to look like going forward in the future, we are charged with watching them. Because immigration is changing us and will change us one way or another, accepting it or fighting it, it's going to change. Because the history of this nation reveals time and again that when we argue immigration, the heart of the matter isn't about who they are, it's about who we are.